Welcome to the Take a Mulligan podcast with your hosts, Brian and Kenny Mulligan. We hope to encourage you not to quit and keep going. If you're at that place where you just want to stop and give up, don't. Second chances can happen. Try again and take a mulligan.
Well, hey, welcome everybody to the Take a Mulligan podcast, and we are so glad you're joining with us today. And we have a very special guest, Kevin Graham, and he has served in the U.S. Marine Corps for over 8 years. He is an intelligence specialist. He was an intelligence specialist for the Virginia State Police in the Counter-Terrorism Unit and the Joint FBI Regional, State, Local, and Law Enforcement Task Force as well. And so, Kevin, you got a lot of background, and I'm going to tell listeners how we met because we, it was a thing, it was a chance that we would have met. And so I was at a networking event, and you happened to be there because you have a nonprofit, and we want to talk about that too. But your nonprofit is called Village Mission, and so we're giving you the opportunity to just share, and we'll probe your brain, ask you some questions along the way. But really, the platform's yours, and we want you to know that. So now, to those of you who are listening, we really want to give a parental warning here, because maybe you have kids in the car and you're listening in the car, and we're going to get into some sensitive topics. And so maybe this is not the best time to listen to it if your kiddos are around. If maybe you have some older ones though, and as your discussion, you may want them to tune in and hear what's going on out there, because a lot of times we don't hear any of this in the mainstream media at all. So thanks again, Kevin, for being on. So why don't you start with give us a little bit of your background, tell us your family stuff and why did you get into the military?
Yeah, that's great. And Brian and Kenny, both, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on board and speak with you this evening. It's always a pleasure to speak with folks. I'm obviously passionate about the Village Mission and what I'm doing now, but always eager to get a little bit of a chance to tell the story about how that came about and the good work that we're doing here. Yeah, so we'll start with why the military. I come from a long line of military folks in my family. My dad was in the Air Force, and he always likes to give me a hard time because I joined the Marines. Right? He always he probably thought that was the best thing for me because I was a little headstrong, and being in the Air Force is. I always like to tell a story when I took him around at Parris Island when I graduated. I always showed him the stairway to heaven. Right? It's this huge long ladder where you climb all up, and it's like one of the hardest things I ever did because I was terrified of heights, and I got all the way up to the top, and you throw yourself over the top, and then you have to climb all the way back down, and if you don't like heights, it's absolutely terrifying. And I bring my dad out there, and I'm like, did you have to do something like that in the Air Force? And without skipping a beat, my dad was like, son, if the Air Force wants you to go up that high, they'll build an elevator, and just walked off to the next obstacle. And I was like, crushed. But that's all I needed to know about the difference between the Marines and the Air Force. But it was a long line of military in my family, and I think just more than serving the military, just a call to be a productive citizen, right? And just serve somehow. If it's not going to be in uniform, it's going to be just do something productive. And I was always raised by my father to not just complain about something from a child up, but if you're going to complain, you better have a solution too, right? Don't just come and say, hey, Daddy, there's a problem, but hey, Daddy, there's a problem, and here are a couple of different ways we can solve it. And hopefully I'm doing the same with my 7-year-old son. I think I'm doing a good job because I'm getting adequate eyes rolling already. So I think I'm probably doing the same thing and was giving my dad the appropriate reaction also. But yeah, it just seemed, I went to college for a few years, and I was doing the music thing, which I thought I was going to be a professional musician at the time, like a lot of kids do.
What do you play?
I played piano and drums and a little guitar and kind of a little bit of everything. Okay. I did it all throughout high school, and I really thought that was going to be my calling. And it just didn't work out, but I had put everything into it. So when that didn't work out, I kind of floundered a little bit. And I'll never forget my dad kind of came up to where I was in college and was like, hey, son, there's nothing keeping you here. If you feel like this isn't you, then why don't you come home? And he could tell I was just kind of wasting time and I wasn't doing well and I wasn't going to class. And so he brought me home. I was a security guard for his company. He worked for Electronic Data Systems, EDS, when it was still around, for back in the old Ross Perot days when we lived in Texas, and then here in Northern Virginia. And my dad's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I am certain that he did this intentionally. He put me on night shift so I wouldn't get in trouble out on my own, run around at night, which I was starting to do. And he teamed me up with a retired Marine who was there for like a retirement gig. Wow. And so I just listened night after night after night after night of this guy just telling Marine stories of when I was younger and jumping out of this and doing this and knocking doors down. And, you know, after about 4 months of that, I was like, hey, Dad, I think I want to join the Marines. And he's like, oh, yeah, you do, huh? So,
good setup.
So, yeah. So I'm sure he had a plan. It just seemed kind of like the natural transition. It was the best decision I made. It was really life changing and a really positive thing for. I mean, it set the path the rest of my life.
Wow, that's great. So tell us about some of your, what you did when you served and what was some of it like.
So I wound up in active duty, Marines, like wearing a uniform for the Marine Corps. I only spent about 8 years. I say only, but I did 2 enlistments, 8 years. And it was great. I think probably the highlight of that was working for what they call the Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team Company, FAST Company. And so it did a lot of embassy hardening for anti-terrorism operations, a lot of what they call close quarter combat, wearing jumpsuits and ski masks and going through and doing cool shooting stuff and, rappelling out of helicopter. I mean, all the stuff you see in movies that to, a 21-year-old is just like, I mean, it's just everything you want to do. It was the greatest 2 years out of that 8 years was spent. And in fact, out of all those 8 years, it's still the only group of guys that we consistently have reunions for. Now, I'm 49 years old and we still just had another reunion. I couldn't make this last one. I had back surgery, but we every 2 years we still have a reunion and still get about 12, 15 of us that get together from that 2-year period between 1997 and 1999. So that gives you an indication on how close this, core group of about 50 of us were. We went through a lot in that time and really became close. We trained a lot, we worked hard, we played hard. We really did some really cool operations. I mean, we took over downtown Richmond one night in like a training exercise where we were flying in helicopters and, they were coming in and throwing flashbangs and blowing out buildings and, right across from VCU. And then afterwards coming out there and all the girls were throwing stuff at us and room numbers and stuff like that. And, I mean, we felt like celebrities. Imagine a bunch of 20-something-year-old guys coming out of there and just, thinking like we owned the city. It was a bit rock star-esque. It was quite a way to spend my well, I guess not even really my youth, but it was a really good a good time. And then I left there and went to the Fleet Marine Corps and joined an infantry unit. And then of course did some 9/11 happened, everything changed, right? And then everything that we thought that was anyone that was involved in Kosovo, we thought up to that point that was the big war, right? Up to that point, there was really nothing before that. I mean, there was the Gulf, but that was before my time. 9/11 happened and the whole world changed. And so everything got real serious. And so there were deployments along with that. And then, I wound up actually being really lucky and getting some special assignments to work up on the Hill as what's called a congressional liaison Marine. And so they have this, every branch of service has a unit that works up on the House and the Senate and then in the Pentagon. And so it's kind of there to act as a liaison between Congress and the military.
Okay.
And so they
That's
do
really neat.
everything from help be a bit of a lobbyist for like, hey, we need funds for this. We need, like when I was there, we were really trying to raise money to keep the Osprey program, if you're familiar with that aircraft, the wings that kind of move, because it was just coming around and it was crashing a lot, and Congress was ready to defund it. And the Marine Corps really believed that this was going to change aviation to be able to launch fighters deeper into enemy targets and carry more payload, and we really believed in it, but it was having some problems, and so we were trying to lobby for that. But also, we were traveling with members of Congress whenever they went places to be able to provide security for them, and it was a multi-hat position, and one that I enjoyed a lot. I got to rub elbows with members of Congress and learned a lot from that, and the good and the bad and quite the ugly, right, of everything you would imagine in Congress, and it was very eye opening at that point to do that, and it was at that point when I was there that I wound up meeting my wife. She had graduated from Georgetown. I was working at the Pentagon at the time, and yeah, I'd been in for about 8 years. It was 2 enlistments, and we got married, and I decided that it wasn't fair to marry her and then go back to go to Iraq or Afghanistan for a year, which is what the deployments were at that time. So I decided to get out and stay home.
Okay. So then, did that change? Like you said, you saw the good, the bad, the ugly. Was there some mindsets that changed, or some eye-opening things? You're like, okay, I see the world differently now.
You'd think
Did that?
so. You'd think.
Yeah.
I was still cocky enough to think that I could make a difference at that point, though.
Okay.
So I left the Marine Corps, and my first job out of the Marine Corps was working for Congress. I used my connections to get a job with a member of Congress, to as a staffer, actually, because I was still a little shy. I think I was maybe a semester short of getting my degree. And
Okay.
so one of the members that was a friend of the Marine Corps, she was on the the House Armed Services Committee, and a pretty good friend of the Marines in general. She had an open spot on her staff, and I interviewed for it, and she hired me, and she said, come experience life up here from this side now as a civilian. And oh man, my wife got me a little briefcase, and I we watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington the night before my first day. I mean, I gents, I bought all into it. I was like, I'm gonna go. I think I even skipped a couple steps into my first day off the metro. Like I was, oh, so naive. I thought I was gonna go in there, and I'm like, former Marine, like I've got some experience. I got some ribbons on my chest, and I'm gonna go walk in here, and I'm gonna change the world. And future Representative Graham, and maybe Senator Graham someday, and within probably 3 months I was like, get me out of here.
Wow.
Oh my
It
goodness.
was awful. Like
Wow.
that's probably where I started to really grow up and learn how things worked or didn't work, right? How
Yeah, it didn't
dysfunctional
work.
the legislative branch really was, and making huge generalizations, right? Of course, there are some good members on both
Yeah.
sides of the aisle, and I've worked with members of Congress so long by now that I can categorically say that both sides of the aisle, I have equal disdain towards both. So I don't get. It's real easy for me not to get political because I think both sides are out of their mind, and equally destructive to any forward progress that we can do. But yeah, they spent all their time fighting each other,
Yeah.
and so little got done because they were so worried about digging up garbage on each other or attacking each other. And I
Wow.
was there for the closure of Gitmo, and they spent so much time attacking what was to paint bad pictures of stuff getting done there that no one recognized the good work that was coming out of there. They focused on a few bad points that happened there that overshadowed all the good intelligence that we were getting out of there for high valued detainees that were coming in there, and saving lives by the information that were coming out of there. And that became such a political quagmire, and I witnessed that firsthand, and it just put such a sour taste in my mouth that I just wanted nothing more to do with politics, and so I got out of there as soon as I could. I think I wound up spending like 9 months total
Okay.
as a
Wow,
staffer
that was
before
enough.
I got out. Yeah.
Wow. So
So
where do you go from
it was
there?
really the
Yeah.
discouragement of being in there that really got you to the point of, I just don't want to be part of this.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was bad.
Interesting.
I mean, I've got I don't like bad mouthing people specifically. So, I mean, I've made it through my career without doing it, and so I won't start now. But
Mhm.
I mean, there are some pretty specific moments and people that I point to in my mind where I'm like, yeah, this is why
Wow.
I'm leaving. Like, this is exactly, you're the reason why, and you're the reason why, and
Mm.
Representative so and so, you're the reason why. In this moment right now is the reason why. Like, this decision that you've made right now is the reason why. Like, I there's just nothing getting done here, and this decision you've made is not for the good of the country.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's not what you said you were going to do. It's not because you're a good person, right? It's not because of the oath that you took. It's because you want to stay in power. It's because you don't like the other party, or it's because you owe someone so and so and you want to get them to do
Mm.
something for you, and so that's why you're voting this way. You don't care about the issue at all. And so
Yeah.
that's why this has happened. So there's like, so many different ways that people vote up there, which I'm not saying anything that people don't already know or maybe assume, but maybe it's different when you're up there and you witness it. And there are some people that love that game and they're like, oh, well, that's just the way it works. Well, I'm just not built that way, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's some people that like that game and play it, but it was really ugly to me.
I mean,
Wow.
I've seen it just in small environments. I mean, even a local church or a local town board,
Yeah, yeah,
and you watch, and you're like, this is wild. Like the little bit of power, that the town board who now oversees, can you put that shed out in your backyard? And they're like, well, we know the code says this, but we're going to say this, and you just see all these stuff, and you're like, man, if this is happening at a small level,
yeah.
I can't even imagine what's happening at the larger level.
Yeah, the HOA, right?
Yeah,
You see
yeah.
some of those,
Mm.
some of those HOA
Yeah.
meetings.
It's
Like,
insane.
oh my gosh, you people need to really relax. Like,
It's that little bit of power, and people get so power hungry.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, Kenny, to your point, like, yeah, so if you see that happen there, imagine what the people who really do have the power, what happens when they're up there, and you see it, right? Because you can tell when they televise members up there and they start talking and no one's ever checked them. No one's ever been like, hey ma'am, hey sir, like, that's not, you can't say that, like, that's not right. No one's ever told them that, right? No, they're
Mm.
surrounded by people who aren't telling them what they need to be told, and
Mhm.
so they just get up there, and the next thing you know, like, more and more people say it. And I'm not even talking about like presidential candidates, like, they're so far out of reality on both sides. Like, I'm talking about like members of Congress who are supposed to be elected by the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so far out of touch with what's really happening. And and we'll get into it maybe later, when I got into actually the special forces community and intelligence community. When I'd be out there forward, they'd come through where I was, right? Because they'd want to talk to me about what was happening on some of the things I was working on. They'd be like, hey, where's the JSOC guy? And I'd be in on these briefings with me, and then with the agency, and they'd want to know. And they'd be like, oh, well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm the NSA a rep, meaning representative, like, right? Because the NSA is in my district, and so I know all about this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, sir, that's awesome. So that'll save us some time. So let me start talking about. And then they start asking these questions about, well, how I don't understand, how do you take pictures through clouds? Like, what are you talking about, man? Like, what? Come on, like, what's happening right now? Like, and then they start talking about, like, oh well, we're going to do this and start influencing operations. And I'm like, oh my god. Like, it got to the point where if a member of Congress was coming through the country or the embassy where I was working at, I would just, hey, I got to go do an op. I'm not going to be here, I'm sorry. Like, I just avoided them at all costs, because it's just a waste of time. They're there for themselves to be able to then go back and be like, oh, I was just over in, Turkey, or I was just over in, X, Y, and Z country, and I got to talk to the operators on the ground, and the boots on the ground, and they're doing a heck of a job. And it's just for themselves. You ask them to tell you, hey, what did I just say? Right? I feel like I'm talking to my son. Like, hey, buddy, repeat back to me. What did I just say? So I know you understand. And they can't do it. They don't know. They don't know what you're saying.
It's such the opposite of serving. They're serving themselves. They're not. So they're supposed to be there serving you.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be figuring out, okay, how can I build you up more? How can I support you? What can we do to make what you do more successful? Right.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. And it just totally reversal.
And it was so disillusional. And that was when because I grew up, and not from my childhood or anything, but from the Marine Corps, 8 years of Marine Corps. I grew up, started politically very conservative, right? That's not out of the ordinary, right? Very Republican, and Bush and 9/11 and megaphone, and like, I'm a Marine and I'm a Republican, and that's kind of how we're raised, and now that's how I'm going to be the rest of my life. And then it wasn't until I got up to the Hill where I started really seeing, like, both sides are like this. They really are. And again, like, I have friends right now that are very, very Republican and very, very Democrat, and my wife and I don't see eye to eye. I thank God I live in Virginia, where you don't have to claim a party, right? It's they don't, you're not a registered anything, but it's both sides. It's just the power hungriness of it. If I were king for a day, I'd have term limits on all members of Congress for,
that would solve a lot of problems.
It really would.
Yeah.
It really would.
That and
2 terms and you're done across the board.
Yeah. And that, I think, like retirement, you come serve for 8 years, but there's no retirement pension, none.
Yeah.
So go back to your business and thank you for serving.
Do it. Yeah, absolutely. Come do as much as you can get done in those 2 terms, and then go. It's public service, right? That's why you should want to be in that office, is to represent your community and do good for the country, not yourself. And it's not that way.
Yeah, it's wild just to hear it. It's just so wild to hear it, an introspective, like you have, being inside there, seeing and experiencing it. You kind of think you get an idea from the outside, like, oh, I'm sure they don't get much done because it seems like they just argue with each other. But to have an inside track like that is just really pretty wild to hear.
Yeah.
So where did you go from there? So share some of the stuff you got into. And
so that next job was really cool. It was that's when I got a job with the Virginia State Police as a I think they called it a tactical intelligence specialist, which sounds cool, and it really was cool. and I'll give you a time frame. You guys will I think be able to place this. It was right when the show 24 was at its peak with Jack Bauer, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's going to be relevant here in a minute, right? It's going to be relevant in a second, because what happened was they created a center in Northern Virginia called the what was it? It's changed names now, but it was the National Capital Regional Intelligence Center, the NICRIC. And so this is different. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF, right, under the FBI. It's every field office of the FBI has one, and it's where they bring local and federal law enforcement together, right? They work together. Well, there was a special one that they created in Northern Virginia, because the Washington field office has the JTTF, the official one for the whole region. And then the other JTTF for Virginia is in Richmond. But they created the NICRIC in Northern Virginia because this is still not too long after 9/11, and so many of the 9/11 hijackers came through Northern Virginia, right? As part of the training, as part of the there was so much of that came through there, and so they wanted to stand up their own center there because of all the different law enforcement jurisdictions. I mean, there's over 100 of them if you think about it. Park Police, Capitol Police, Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun County Sheriff's Department, Alexandria City, Fairfax County. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on about all the different. You don't realize how many law enforcement agencies have to coordinate and collaborate in this one small area of just Northern Virginia and DC. And that's federal and and local and county and state. It's insane. So they created the special task force to be able to just look at counterterrorism issues when they popped up and things like that. So the Virginia State Police had sent their representative, and it was a state trooper. And they had sent a couple different troopers, and the state police are largely in charge of highways, right? Highway patrol. And so they're bred a certain way, they're trained a certain way. And so the people that they had brought in to work collaboratively with these counterterrorism folks hadn't worked real well. They didn't mesh well with that group. You're bringing them in from all over. I don't know how else to say it other than that. They're bred a little bit differently, right? They do their job very well, regimented for highway patrol and for, the big ranger hat and, hey, man, you're going too fast and this is what it is. And they're amazing at what they do. But working collaborative CT, counterterrorism investigations, was not going well for them. So the intelligence division of the state police decided that they were going to try to find someone instead from the DC area to then pluck and put in that billet and then train them on what the state police was looking for. They figured they'd do it in reverse. So they did this open vacancy. I happened to find it. When I was looking, I was like, hey, maybe I'll look into law enforcement and bring my military background. And I wasn't sure I wanted to be a cop. My wife wasn't crazy about that. She's like, you just spent 8 years in the Marine Corps getting shot at. Why are you going to do this now as a police officer? Like, whatever. I was like, well, I don't know, but I got to get out of the hill because this is insane. I'm not happy here. And so I found this job as a tactical intelligence specialist. And I was like, well, I have been doing this kind of work in the military, with the Fast Company and with all this other stuff and putting this, I think I can do this job. And I interviewed for it. And what they were really looking for was someone that had the personality to be able to brief very senior level people, to be able to talk to commandant of the state police, to be able to talk to senior agents of the FBI, to work collaboratively with senior level folks, but also be able to roll up your sleeves and sit next to an agent or a detective and be able to have that kind of dialogue and work investigations and have some sort of intelligence background and tactical mindset. And so I just happened to land that job, and it was awesome. Like, I got my clearances from the FBI. So my first kind of federal law enforcement clearances. I was kind of attached to the JTTF, I guess, tangentially through that. And then started working counterterrorism cases with the FBI. Every tip that came in for Northern Virginia. I mean, we were working, there's a hostage situation, I think, in Alexandria. Someone took a bus. I was running down there with the police escorting me down there, and I was doing that. There was a house that blew up. They thought it was a bomb. I was rushed out there. I was working that on my little tower book, doing that. And we were doing link analysis I was in it, and it was a really cool, again, right time, right place. And, but it was great because I got to come home at night to my new wife, and we were living here in Northern Virginia, and then I got to go all around the area. I was working one really cool case with a WMATA police officer where I was attached to him for probably, maybe it was like 4 months. It wasn't longer than 6, but for that time, I mean, we crawled around all the metro tunnels with flashlights and looking for all kinds of vantage points, and did a study on where where we would go to blow up like a tunnel if we were going to do that. It was like a bit of a red cell. So if I were to, like, all the different bridges in DC that cross over with metro, and like if I were to park a truck underneath, how much explosives would I need to really blow that thing up, and what it affected, and if there was a tunnel, like where choke points, what do I have to do to cripple DC basically from a metro perspective? And so, take their blueprint of stations and walk around. And I mean, it was what led to ultimately the big trash cans that you see now with all the big, they're the bomb-proof trash cans. So now you can't use trash cans in subways anymore, with as bomb containers, which is what they used to be. So I got to do some really cool stuff with that job. It was it was really interesting.
So where'd you go from there?
So I did that for a few years, and then the superintendent was really really great, really honest with me. He said, hey, I've got you're doing great, but this is the state police. We don't have a huge budget, and by the way, you've kind of already reached the top of where you can go. Like, there's no promotion in store for you. And I was still pretty young, and I was like, man, this is early for me to have reached my peak. I still think I have a lot more to do. And I got wooed a little bit by a government contracting company. So I went to the dark side for a little bit. And that was not a great experience. I was too young. Also, I think to go there, they wanted me because of the experience that I had with the fusion centers and the intelligence centers. You
good on your end, Bri?
I am, yeah. I'm not sure if it's him or not. He's been going in and out for me. We'll just have to edit these pieces out, I guess.
Yeah, let me just give him a minute here and come back in.
Has he been going in and out for you?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was me or not because you looked like you were still moving. He's barely been moving, but I could hear him, but now I lost him.
See if he realizes it, come back in. In the meantime, we can share a little bit. Like, wow, this is pretty cool stuff. Yeah,
crazy.
Bounce back in here.
Yeah, you could just edit that out.
Yeah, it's amazing how, because we keep sharing this. It's just amazing how much we don't know, right, about what's going on in our.
I know.
So,
there he is.
Cut out there, Kevin, a little bit.
Yeah. I'm not sure what happened. I'm hardwired. My internet is. That's really
that is.
Oh, weird. Okay. Yeah.
I'm really sorry about that, guys.
Intelligence and all this stuff. Maybe
that's okay.
Mess with us.
And I even
maybe they were knocking you out so you don't share your stories.
Clients tonight, so that the bandwidth. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So go ahead. I'll probably edit this part out, and then so how'd you pick up where you were? So you started work for a government agency.
So I went to a government contractor, and they offered me a pretty good penny to go over there. They wanted some experience based off of what I had done when I was with the Fusion Center or with the NICRIC. And that was right when all the fusion centers were starting to be created around the country. They were starting to stand them up one by one, and so they wanted that experience. But it wasn't really a great experience for me personally. I thought of a contracting job as more of as a job rather than a career. So I didn't really last there too long, but it did give me an opportunity to go and get my master's degree, which was a great opportunity. I went to Georgetown and got my master's. And while I was there, I met someone who I couldn't tell exactly what she did, but we can kind of sniff each other out that come from military background, doing cool stuff, and we became friends. And eventually she was like, what do you do? And I was like, I work for this contracting company. I'm not real happy. And she found out like what I used to do. And she's like, if you're interested, this is after we had become friends and talked for a while. And she obviously knew a lot about me. She said, I work for an organization that does some pretty cool things you might be interested in. I can't talk a lot about it, but we're doing a recruiting event here in DC in a couple weeks. And if you're interested, I can set it up for you to do it. And I was like, yeah, I love the fact that you can't talk about it means I'm probably going to love it. So yeah, let's do it. Right. And it was just like out of a movie. I mean, I showed up to a hotel and it was in a little meeting room. It was a really big room, but there were no chairs. There was just one table and like 3 people sitting in it, and then one chair. And I walked all the way to the end, and I sat down, and they asked me a bunch of questions. I was there for I guess like an hour, and never really knew exactly what it was. And they said thanks very much. And then next thing I know, about a week later, I got a call, and it was yeah, you got a job offer, and here's where it is, and here's what it is, and here's what you're going to be doing. And it was for a group that was part of the Navy at the time. It's now since kind of evolved, but it was doing a lot of different things. One of them was supporting the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, and doing some high value target operations and things like that in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I was supporting them, and it was my first real experience in the kind of the black special forces world. And so I did that for a while. I deployed with them as an augmentee, and then that led to me getting an offer to directly work for JSOC as a permanent member, and that changed my life. I mean, that was it. I never, once I got a taste of what it was like to work with those professionals and with the best of the best, I knew that's where I belonged and where I wanted to be, and so I worked really hard to get there, and and I spent the rest of my very long career, 22 years in the government, as an intelligence specialist for JSOC. I started out working for the Joint Reconnaissance Targeting Force, or JRTF, and then that later became the Joint Interagency Task Force, National Capital Region, and then they chopped me off to Delta Force to work for them, and then I spent many rotations out with them around the world, and then doing counterterrorism, hostage recovery operations, things like that. And then my last deployment with them, while I was deployed, then I interviewed for Naval Special Warfare Development Group, and they reached out and said, "Hey, we're looking for a senior civilian to come in and lead the team of what you're currently doing, and also still deploy and do the job still. And so, how, would you be interested?" So they did a direct hire, and so I got home from that deployment. We rented a house without ever seeing it, packed up the house, and went down to Virginia Beach, and I started the job there. I think I was there for maybe a few months before I had my first deployment with SEAL Team 6 down there.
Wow.
And that was it, man. I did that for a long time, and I left that about I guess it's been 7 years now that I left that, but that was the last job I had with the government, and that took me to the end of my government career.
Okay. Now, how did that lead into now what you're doing now?
So the transition from that life, so the 8 years of active duty, and then whatever, the 22 years of total government service, the transition from that to the civilian world was really, really hard for me, especially leaving JSOC to just being a regular civilian. I a lot of us that leave the task force, that's it's referred to, that task force life, is really difficult. And I was a support guy, right? I was an intelligence guy. I wasn't even an operator, like that. I wasn't a SEAL. I wasn't a a Delta Force operator. Like those guys have it even harder, because those are the ones that are actually jumping out of helicopters and kicking down doors and shooting people and actually rescuing hostages. I'm just gathering the intelligence and going out and out there and doing stuff. But even at that high pace, I mean, you really are at, they always say tip of the spear as like a euphemism, but you really are at the tip of the spear. You're doing life-changing operations, right? You're out there every single day. And for the time that I was with them, all those years, I wasn't home more than 5 months at a time.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. My wife brought that up. So I know that she was counting. Like I never counted, but I know she was counting. But yeah, the whole time, because you're not doing your job at home, there's no job to do at home, right? The job is overseas. The job is, living out. So I wasn't deploying with a unit. I was deploying by myself for my particular job, and living in an apartment somewhere out in town, or living in a hotel and someplace in Africa or whatever, and working out of an embassy and going to have meetings with people in restaurants and in corners of streets or whatever, and working with the partner host government and their intelligence organizations, and being in on interrogations and all these things to gather the intelligence to do whatever we could, and working with drone surveillance and satellite imagery and signals intelligence, gathering up as best of a picture as possible to make that as airtight as possible, so that we could find U.S. hostages that have been taken by ISIS or Al Qaeda, or or our allies, right, that have also been taken hostage, or find these high value targets that are responsible for planning and carrying out attacks that are killing hundreds of people in the Middle East and in Africa, or ISIS, or whatever that mission was, to try to get that intelligence so airtight so that when the real heroes are called to jump out of planes and go execute the mission, they know what they're getting into, right? Because those are the guys that are really the ones putting themselves out there. And so that pressure is why you get out there and you're not sleeping for days at a time, because you're trying to make sure that they have as good as intelligence as possible, because they've got the hard job of you kicking down the door, and you want to make sure when they kick down that door, they know what's on the other side of it. And so you're trying to get them all that information as best as you can, and that's really, really difficult to do. So when you leave that life and now you come back and you're like, I don't know what to do with myself, right? It's a really hard thing. And I have become a mentor and a coach for other folks that are doing that now that I've kind of gotten my act together a little bit. And it's become easier for me to try to help others do that. But I tell the story of, like, I spent a long time in the morning with my cup of coffee looking out the back window for, like, the Black Hawk to land in my backyard. And, someone would be like, Kevin, like, we need you. Like, you're the only one. Like, we need you to come back. And, and I'd be like, I got my bag ready. I'll be right back. Let me go grab it. It's already packed, and it never happened. Like, it never happened. They don't need me. Like, it was, they're fine without me. No one ever asked me to come back. And, it was a nice farewell party that they gave for me, but, then that was it. And, that's a really tough pill to swallow too, when you give up 20 years of your life of this, and then you realize that wheel keeps on turning without you too. So it was really tough. I found a great job when I got out. It was in sales and selling open source intelligence software platform back to the government. So I was really successful at it. I hated it, but I found a mentor. I wanted to get back into operations, but in the civilian side. I wanted to do what I'd done before, but help, like, companies now instead of countries, right? And I felt like I could do that. I found a really good mentor who was very smart and told me, like, I know you've got this great background. That's awesome. A lot of people do. What you need to do is go get smart on business. You need to go sell, market, understand sales operations, business development. You need to go get an MBA. You need to do that now for a few years. Then an opportunity will come, and you can prove to someone that you now not only have 20 years of operations experience in, like, military and all, and you can do that, but also now you've got 5 or so years of, like, sales, and you understand how to do a P&L, and you understand how to generate revenue, and like, you can survive in the business world, because that's where people in the private sector are scared of people like you, because they don't think that you know how to make money, and that's what this is all about, right? And I was like, oh shit. like I did not want to hear that, right? Like, that sounds awful. Like, that sounds so boring. I didn't want to do that at all. But I took his advice, and so I got a great job, and I went all in. I wound up selling. I took over Canada and Caribbean, Latin America as, like, my portfolio for this company, and the CEO let me run with it. He's like, you go and let us know how we can help. And I mean, I was doing sales and business development, and I was doing all of it. I was traveling a lot, and my wife was a great resource because she was into the veterans community a lot, and so she was giving me all these free resources available to veterans to help understand, finance and all these things. I wound up getting my MBA from Notre Dame, and I did that. So that program was amazing. It really helped me set up not just through networks, but also a greater understanding of all these concepts and policy, processes and everything like that. So I really, really took it all in. And then eventually an opportunity came up where I'm sitting now, where I got a job at a consulting firm called Control-Risc, where I'm very happy doing that now, where I run a crisis and response arm of a global and a security risk consulting firm, that we're able to kind of do that for companies. So that's kind of my journey of where I end up for my day job. But as part of that, in that ugly phase of these 5 years where I was dreading getting out of bed every morning, my wife, being the who I reference a lot during my story because she plays such a huge. I'm so glad I married up. She's so much smarter than I am, and has given me so many good pieces of advice over the years. She said, "Listen, you're miserable now, and I get that, but you got to do this, and it's going to take some time for you to get the sales experience and all these things to get to the next level. But find something that's going to get you out of bed, right? Find something that you're going to be passionate about. Find something that is maybe you're not going to make money doing, but you can kind of sink your teeth into, and the time that you're not doing your day job that's making you unhappy. What can get you out of the bed? Like, what do you care about?" And so my mind immediately went to countering human trafficking, and that went there quickly because I spent a lot of my time when I got into this job at JSOC, when I would go out and live on the economy and live on my own and live in hotels, especially, and have meetings in hotels and all these places all over the world. I witnessed a lot of human trafficking happening right in front of me. Right, so I'd be sitting in these hotels waiting for a meeting to show up or waiting to meet whoever I was, and just parading out in the open, coming up, they, you know, 5 or 6 underage girls just being led by an older man walking right through the lobby, getting into the elevator, going up. Right, you know exactly what they're there for. Right,
Wow.
dressed the way that they were, wearing makeup, things like that, and then so this happens over and over, right? And I can't do anything about that. Nor you see that here, and it's like, hey, whoa, 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 are you okay? Is this guy your father, right? What's happening? You immediately would jump up and intervene. I do that over there. I'm now jeopardizing the mission that I'm there to do, which is to find a U.S. hostage, or maybe more, multiple hostages, or to potentially find someone that's planning a mission to kill 300 people, right? Or to so I can't intervene to do any of that, right? And it's very accepted there in this country that I happen to be in, or the countries that I happen to be in. Like, they don't care.
Wow.
And and then we'll get to what's happening in Afghanistan too. But it's not only accepted, but it's like encouraged as part of the culture to do these things with little boys and little girls, right? It's part of it. So this goes on for years and years, where I see this happen in Africa, with the forced marriage and the child soldiering, and you see this happen in the Middle East with the young girls, and that weighs on you after years of seeing all this stuff happen, and you just can't do anything about it. So when my wife said that to me, that's where my mind went right away. Like, I don't know what I want to do, but it's got to be something to pay a little penance back to all these things that I saw that I couldn't do anything about. And so I worked with another very close family friend who's been a bit of a mentor to me also. I guess life coach, amazing human being, and I came to him, and so he helped me start what was the Village Project back in the day. And this was an LLC that we created. And he's like, there might be a way to actually make money off of this, given your life experience. So we packaged up a program that we were going to take to hotels and businesses, because it's not just sex trafficking, it's labor trafficking. It's a lot, especially here in the U.S. There's a lot of labor trafficking that happens unbeknownst to companies, right? That they're hiring people that have been labor trafficked, and their visas are being held ransom by the people who have muled them over, and now they're working, but they don't know that when they get paid, that paycheck goes to someone else. It's not going to them or their family. It's happening, more often than people think, especially in the food industry and service industry here in the U.S. So I wrote this package together, and education, and the idea of the Village Project was to go and educate companies, hotels primarily, and the service industry, on how to train your employees to basically make your company like a hard target for trafficking activities, right? So let's not make your company susceptible to trafficking to happen here. whether that's, hotels, and basically like train your service employees what to look for signs of that trafficking's happening in your hotel rooms, when they're checking in, when they're cleaning the rooms, like what to look for, any signs that, there could be abuse happening. And then same thing for like the food and service industry, like, what are some of the signs and signals? Are they being controlled? Are they multiple forced getting into a car, not allowed to talk to anyone, things like that? Like, it was the whole thing. So I packaged it up, and then I was going to sell that and come and teach, quarterly. And then I became like a certified human trafficking investigator. And that way I could testify also in case someone decided to, if they got out, and they could come back and sue the company to say, you should have done more, you should have known. Now I could be a bit of a protector to that company too, to say, listen, you did your due diligence, you hired me, I came, I taught people, we did our best. And that could be a bit of an insurance for the company also. So there's a bit of a business aspect too. So I was trying to market it that way. So it actually got some traction, and we were doing pretty good. And then COVID hit, and the service industry and the hotel industry completely shut down. So so that didn't work out very well. So the Village project kind of just went flat, and that all shut down. So that lay dormant for quite a while. And now fast forward to August 31st, right, of 2021. And now Afghanistan falls.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think maybe we'll take it there. We're going to start talking about where we are now and how the Village mission kind of grew out of that.
Wow. So, Brian, this has been pretty interesting talking with Kevin here. And this has definitely been going a lot longer than we thought, because he has so much to share, which has been really great. So we're gonna do something we never did before. We're gonna take a mulligan on our Mulliga podcast, and we're gonna break here, and so this way we can break up the two podcasts. So we hope you will join us again. We're gonna release this episode right away. We just thought we'd break it up a little bit in case you're listening in the gym or something like that, and you just do 45 minutes or whatever it is. So anyway, we're gonna break here, and then you listen, and we're gonna pick up the next part 2 coming up real soon.
We know everyone can use a second chance or a do-over, so take a mulligan and try again. Thanks so much for joining with us today. Make sure you follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Like, click, and subscribe.